I'm Linda Kincaid. You've been watching CNN's continuing coverage of US President Biden's visit to Poland nearly 1 year after Russia invaded Ukraine. It was a major moment for the US president on the world stage. Joe Biden just wrapping up that speech from Warsaw, reaffirming America's commitment to Ukraine and the unity of Western allies. Now, this comes at a critical time, just days ahead of the 1-year anniversary of Russia's unprovoked invasion of its democratic neighbor. Now, the US president said since then, democracies are stronger and autocracies are weaker. And the Western world has answered a fundamental question.
Would we stand up for the sovereignty of nations? Would we stand up for the right of people to live free from naked aggression? Would we stand up for democracy? 1 year later, we know the answers. Yes, we would stand up for sovereignty, and we did. Yes, we would stand up for the right of people to live free from aggression, and we did. And we would stand up for democracy, and we did. And yesterday, I had the honor to stand with President Zelensky in Kyiv to declare that we will keep standing up for these same things, no matter what.
Well, hours earlier, the Russian president was lashing out and doubling down during a speech of his own. In his State of the Nation address, Vladimir Putin blamed Ukraine and the West for the war he began 1 year ago. And he accused the US and its allies of escalating the conflict. But Mr. Putin himself upped the ante significantly after announcing that Russia is suspending participation in its last remaining nuclear treaty with the US. And then he issued this threat.
I will not now dwell on the West's attempts to turn the tide of hostilities, on their plans to increase military supplies. Everyone is already well aware of this. But one circumstance should be clear to everyone. The longer range Western systems will come to Ukraine, the further we will be forced to move the threat away from our borders. It's natural.
Well, Kurt Volker is a former U.S. ambassador to NATO and a former U.S. special representative for Ukraine negotiations. He joins me now live from Washington. Good to have you with us.
Thanks. Great to be here.
So these have been described as dueling speeches. On the one hand, you had Putin saying that Russia can't be defeated. And then we just heard from the U.S. president saying that Ukraine will never be a victory for Russia. Freedom, probably the key theme in that speech, right?
Yeah. Well, I think several things. First off, it's great that President Biden went to Kyiv and that he is articulating the case for why Ukraine's sovereignty and independence, their fight for freedom, is our fight as well, and that it's important that Ukraine succeed. Now, as for Putin, Putin, he attacked Ukraine unprovoked. No one is attacking Russia. No one's threatening to take over Russia. He's trying to put out all this bluster to put us off, to make us afraid to help Ukraine. And it's simply not working.
And not only did Putin say that Russia would achieve its aims, he falsely claimed, as you point out, that Western nations started this war. Biden countered that, saying that the West was not planning to attack Russia, as Putin laid out. He said the war is not a necessity, it's a tragedy, and that Putin can end it at any time with one word. Is there an indication that this speech is airing, that Biden's speech aired in Russia, and that people will watch it and listen to it?
I doubt it. I think, and even if they show snippets of the speech, they will be editorializing around it to say to have recorded only what they want people to hear from what Biden said, and to distort the message with their own spin on top of that. So I don't think it's going to get through to the Russian people very clearly. That being said, the Russian people are fairly savvy, and they know that this war is not going well because they know the government continues to push people into the military forces. They know they've let people out of prison to push them up to the front line. They know the casualties are very high. We've seen over 300,000 Russians flee the country in order to avoid conscription. So I don't think President Biden's message will be reported fairly in Russia, but the Russian people themselves know what's going on.
It's interesting, though, you say that, because when you look at the opinion polls in Russia, it shows that Putin has well over 80% of support, and that his support has actually increased in the country since late last year. Do you believe those polls? What should we read into them?
Not at all. No, it's not a free country. First off, most people decline to participate in polls like that. And then when they are asked, they just give the answer that they think the state wants to hear because that's the only safe thing to do. And it doesn't actually reflect anything about what people really think. So I would not say that there is no support for Putin. When the country's at war, people tend to rally around the flag a bit. But at the same time, I don't think it's anywhere near the level of 80% or the dramatic support that these polls seem to indicate.
The last time Biden spoke in Poland, he went off script. This was a few weeks after the invasion, and he said, for goodness sake, this man cannot remain in power, speaking about Putin. That was almost a year ago. He's since declared Putin a war criminal. He mentioned Putin's name 10 times in his speech today, which is a complete contrast to Putin, who didn't mention Biden's name once. What's your take on that?
Well, I think it's good that President Biden is speaking out more forcefully now. When he made those remarks in Poland last year, the White House quickly then stepped in and tried to wash them away and said, no, he was off script. He didn't mean that. I think it's good that the president is out there in a more forceful tone. The one thing I would caution, though, is it's too soon to be taking a victory lap. Ukraine hasn't won this war yet. We made a lot of mistakes over the last year in how slow we were in providing assistance and how we withheld assistance. But now that the president has staked U.S. prestige on the line here for Ukraine's victory in this war, we need to stop restricting the aid that we're giving and give Ukraine everything it needs to end this war quickly. Evelyn Farkas was just on, and she was saying that. I completely agree.
We've heard that this war could go on for weeks, for months, potentially years. You've called on Biden to end this war quickly. What would that entail?
Well, I think it would mean the longest range artillery that we have. It's the ATACMS system, can go 300 kilometers. That would force the Russians to pull their supply chains back into their own territory so that it would be safe from Ukrainian attacks in Ukrainian territory. That would be significant because it'd be very difficult for the Russians to supply their deployed forces. Another is fighter aircraft or multi-role aircraft, so that the Ukrainians can provide some air cover to the armor that they're getting so that they can advance and take territory. The most important thing for the Ukrainians in the next several months is to integrate all of these systems that they're getting from the United States and others, and to take territory back that would cut off this landline of communication between Russia and Crimea, that would isolate Crimea, not take it over, not try to overrun it, but isolate Crimea as a threat to Ukraine. And that would be significant for Ukrainian security of shipping in the Black Sea, and Ukraine's further ability to push the Russians the rest of the way.
Former U.S. Ambassador to NATO, Kurt Volker, great to have you on the program. We appreciate your analysis. Thank you.
It's a pleasure. Thank you.
Well, still to come here on One World, U.S. officials are trying to soothe fears in East Palestine, Ohio, after that fiery train derailment. We're going to bring you the latest on that story in just a moment.